All righty, welcome back for another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today, Wednesday, November 2nd. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit of football recruiting. I know a lot of you guys liked when we talked about recruiting. Unfortunately, OU missed out on a priority defensive lineman, defensive tackle the other day, which is, something you never love to see. That's the third straight. And I know some people are quite frustrated with that run and talking about Todd Bates, and we're going to have some thoughts on that. We're going to talk about where does OU go now for the defensive linemen? Who are they going to target? Who are the new offers that they've been handing out over the last few days? And then we're going to preview Baylor. OU and Baylor both coming in at 5-3. OU's trying to make a win streak. They're starting to get hot, hopefully. Build a lot of momentum going into this early National Signing Day, which I believe is important and critical to finishing out this class. So we're going to be talking about what OU needs to do and what Baylor might be able to pose and do against Oklahoma. But before we get into it, just want to say we appreciate it. We're knocking on the door of 5,200 subscribers. If you're new here or if you've been here more than once, hit the subscribe button. If you hadn't already, turn that notification bell on so you know when we go live. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, be sure to leave us a review. It helps us out on that platform as well. And another thing that we're going to do for the OU Baylor game, I know it's a short turnaround, but we're going to give away a pair of tickets. So if you're interested in entering into a contest to win a pair of tickets, you need to be able to, watch this video. You need to be for the end of video challenge. You need to be commenting that you've done that. Filled out obviously whatever Jose ends up asking you, and then follow us on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. If you only have one, that's fine. And just let us know that you've done that, and then do the end of video challenge, and we'll announce it on our Friday video, and then you'll just send us an email. And unfortunately, if we announce the winner and no one claims them, we won't have enough time to give them out. So if you're going to enter into it, be sure to come back and check out Friday's video because you'll want to. It's easy, it's free. We email the tickets. We've been doing this since the spring game. We gave away like 5 pairs of tickets there. We've been giving away tickets left and right. So we want to continue to do that. So be sure to enter into that just as our way to say thank you. So, okay. So we'll get into it. So obviously, if people have been following recruiting, and I'm sure a lot of people have that have been watching this channel, is Caden McDonald ended up committing to Ohio State. Caden McDonald's a 2023 4-star defensive tackle from Suwanee, Georgia. He's the number 33 defensive lineman, just depending, but he's a composite 4-star, top 250 player. A bigger guy. I mean, at 6'3", 310, he was definitely someone as a defensive tackle we could have definitely used. So I'm not going to minimize his loss because he would have provided some immediate depth and help there. I'm not going to minimize that. Now, OU's been kind of on a downs, on a slide, I guess you could say, after losing out on Jordan Renaud, then David Hicks surprise, and now Caden McDonald. I will say, out of me personally, out of the 3, I never thought OU really had a legitimate shot at Caden McDonald. But as soon as OU lost out on the other 2, I was becoming very hopeful that OU was putting more of a full court press and was going to be able to pull out a Hail Mary of some sort with him. And it seemed like they pushed all the right buttons, and just at the end of the day, it just didn't work out. Obviously, distance didn't end up being a factor for him committing to Ohio State when he's from Georgia. Jose, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It is a big, I don't want to specifically call it a loss because we never had him, but it stinks that we didn't get him. But at the end of the day, and we talked about it before we started recording, for a guy, especially at that position, you can't blame them if they go to Georgia, Ohio State, or Alabama. Those 3 schools have produced elite defensive line talent, even better than Clemson. And they've done it for a long time now, especially Ohio State. Larry Johnson is just churning out a factory up there, defensive linemen. They have some really good position coaches. I don't know how schools haven't tried to poach them for coordinator positions or head coaching positions at smaller schools, but whatever Ryan Day and the Ohio State athletic department is doing is clearly working and retaining those coaches, because Brian Hartline is creating that place as just probably the best place for wide receivers to go. And Larry Johnson, again, with the defensive line, thinking about the Bosa brothers, Chase Young, And then I think this Saturday might have had a bigger impact than we'd like to think with JT Tuamaloa, I think is how you pronounce his name. Dude looked like an absolute beast. I know it's not in the interior, but those having those guys, three of them that I just mentioned being first round talent, I think they were all top 10 picks. Tua Maloa might be a top 10 pick by the time he gets to that time in his football career. It's hard to turn that down as a defensive lineman. So I can't blame him. Would Todd Bates have potentially done something similar? Yeah, but I think that's more of us being, hopeful as fans when Larry Johnson is putting out that product on the field as we speak. Not that Todd Bates is doing a terrible job, but he just doesn't have the talent that Ohio State has been able to develop quite yet. I think also some fans that are starting to question Todd Bates need to take a step back and look at what we do have on the defensive line in this class versus what we haven't had in the defensive line in the last 5 classes. We have a top 100 player in Derek LeBlanc. We have a 5-star defensive lineman or edge. I can't remember how he's currently designated in PJ Adebawore, and a fringe top 100 player currently in Colton Bosick. I know some people are still scared about the Bosick situation, but he hasn't decommitted. There's really no reason outside of him visiting Texas to have really any worry about it. And if he was going to decommit, it seems like the staff is pretty adamant and either you're with us or we're going to split our separate ways. For example, the Caleb Spencer situation. OU staff said either you're with us or we just got to both split separate ways. We'll start recruiting other players at that position and you can move on to the next place. That's what happened. He's now at Miami, and Oklahoma is moving on to other opportunities, and Cecilia Kana and other offers that we'll talk about when we do more recruiting focus videos. But it happens. These losses happen. It's not like this Oklahoma recruiting class doesn't have good defensive line talent. Would it have been great to get him? Yes. And it's like you said, this one was more of a Oklahoma had to do a lot more catching up. David Hicks, that was a blindside, and everyone knows that by now. If you don't think that was a blindside, I don't know why, because it's been very clearly reported that was a very much a last second decision and flip by David Hicks. And Jordan Renard, I know we had a lead there for quite a while, but again, Alabama being Alabama, they can show that they produced a lot of talent over Nick Saban's entire career there at the defensive line. Todd Bates hasn't quite coached that much talent. So even though his resume is good, it's just not as good. So he still has a little bit of catching up to do when it comes to beating some of these schools, but more often than not, Oklahoma's going to win, especially in the long term. This is really their first full cycle recruiting for Oklahoma. You really got to show players what you can do. Defensive line talent play hasn't been amazing, hasn't been terrible, but not amazing. And sometimes that stuff does hold you back a little bit. And relationships will help get players here. And hopefully in the 2024 class, it seems like Oklahoma's got a good lead with a lot of defensive linemen. And hopefully they can close those out here in the next probably like 6-7 months, because I really don't feel like Oklahoma's going to get a ton of commitments in the 24 class before the summertime.
And you bring up a good point of looking what Oklahoma has right now. They've got 2 great edge players. They've got Derek LeBlanc. That's a good haul. I mean, think about it like previously, we would have killed to have a 5-star and 2 4-stars along that defensive line. I know Chavis is there, so it's not all Todd Bates and things like that, but I do think Todd Bates plays a role in that because Chavis is a young coach and he's being mentored by Todd Bates and obviously Brent Venables as well. So Bates has an influence on the edge players as well. It's all about perspective. Sometimes it's tough to kind of look what you already have and not be thankful or be happy with what you've got comparing what it could have been. It's always hard in life and in general of like, man, if I would have done this, I could have this much more money or whatever. It's the same thing in this. If OU maybe would have done 1 or 2 things differently, maybe do they have another defensive lineman commit or 2 potentially? But I do think, like you said, play on the field does play a factor a little bit per se into some of these kids' decisions. If they're split 50-50, like if Caden McDonald was truly torn and you've got Ohio State and Oklahoma, but Ohio State is in the college football playoff, they're in the running right now and they're looking really good and they've got a great, backups and they're going to be good for a long time. It's a little more safe, I guess you could say. It's more secure to go at Ohio State. And you've got Larry Johnson. He's been putting guys in the NFL. They're winning games. Brent Venables and his staff and Todd Bates are a little bit of a victim of, we lost some kids to the portal. We lost some kids to the draft. We came in late. We're doing a culture overhaul here. We're thin. Like, we're not looking great. We're showing signs of improvement throughout the year. So it's a little harder to sell these kids. We've always thought that this 23 class would be good for the defensive line. We are, but we really thought the 24 class was going to be excellent. And it still very well could be. Like, there's the sky's the limit in 24. And I think the play on the field for next year will be significantly better, because I think OU not only is offering new kids that we're going to talk about here in just a second, but they're going to go to the portal. They need depth and they need experience and veteran leadership. And they're going to go to the portal for defensive linemen, for linebackers, defensive backs. They're going to go they're going to get people at every position. And, they've had some retirements. They've had some kids get hurt for the year. They're going to have graduations. There's going to be kids that are going to be asked, basically kind of nudged out the door of like, hey, we're kind of moving on. You need to go to the NFL. You need to transfer type deal, kind of nudging them out. I think you're going to see a big overhaul. And I think this whole defense is going to be different next year. So,
And Danny Stutzman, he was on the podcast on the Prairie. I blanked on that name for a second, and I haven't seen it all. Like I mentioned, I don't watch I'm not like an avid watcher of theirs, but I did see a few clips, and he mentioned like this is year one in this scheme, and Brent Venables, pretty much every time he gets in front of a microphone and talks about this team, always talks about how the coaches can't be the only leaders. It's got to, the players have to step up and lead the team, speak up. And once, I think that we'll see a lot more of that next year and how that will impact the building of this program, because it's tough to lead when you're still learning. Once Danny Stutzman said it perfectly. He said, give us a year. Once we know the scheme, once we really understand the plays and where we need to be, this defense can be a lot better. We've seen what Brent Venables can do with a defense and developing it. It's learning. They're learning this year. When you have a guy like Danny Stutzman, and I hope he's here for a couple, 2 more years, what he has left in eligibility, he can teach the linebackers behind him, hey, this is what you should do. Because it's a lot easier to learn from your peer who you see is doing something correctly sometimes than from a coach, because a coach is going to show you on the board, he's going to show you on film, he's going to kind of walk you through, and when you're at practice. But when you see if you think about it in a work sense, if you see your colleague do something, you're going to try to emulate it and hopefully develop on top. And that's kind of what Brent Venables is trying to do here. They're learning this year. Next year they'll be better and they'll be able to teach the young guys. So you'll see a guy like Sammy Omasigo be probably better than a Danny Stutzman. Danny Stutzman, let's say his ceiling is, I mean, it's going to sound rude, but let's say his ceiling, for example, is like day 2 pick in the NFL. He teaches that knowledge of the Oklahoma defense to a Sammy Omasigo. Maybe his ceiling is a little bit higher. I'm not saying that is both of their ceilings, just an example, but you got to, these guys got to teach each other eventually. Right now, it's hard to teach when you're still learning.
That's a good point. I mean, no one's ever confident in teaching something if you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, you can't be knowledgeable of something if you can't teach it. And if they're not teaching it, then obviously they're still learning. So I'm not concerned. Yeah, it does suck to lose out on McDonald, but at the end of the day, OU is going to be fine. So a couple offers have been starting to roll out for some defensive linemen, and people are going to roll their eyes because they're not 4 and 5 stars and whatever. So we'll talk with the first one that came out on, I think it was October 30th. So just a couple days ago. Marcus Strong. He is 6'3", 265, according to 247 profile from Lake Butler, Florida. So another kid in the SEC country. He's been racking up offers left and right. As of recently, I think he's up to 17 offers. He just got an offer on Halloween from West Virginia. He's got offers OU, West Virginia, Maryland, UCF, Liberty, other schools. So he's got 17 offers already. And this rush of offers is probably where schools are realizing, hey, we missed out on a target. We don't feel good. And OU's in that boat. And so you identify and you do that. And I don't know a whole lot about Marcus Strong other than he's a bigger guy. He might be a guy that you need to develop and spend some more, maybe a year or two of him being in the program and beefing him up. Maybe he's not a day one starter, but I just think that he's got the frame. He's someone that should rightfully, be considered as we'd be excited to have him in this class. You don't necessarily need day one starters all the time. Sometimes you just need a guy that can be more of a project and be like a Kenneth Murray and come in and be a superstar. It might not be a day one guy, but could be down the road.
Yeah, I agree. And while sure, right now it might not be the sexiest guy to bring on with regards to like what he's done so far at the college level, I think Brent Venables talked about it in his press conference today. Sometimes coaches and fans get so far ahead to the next class, the class after that. I think Brent Venables, when he was talking about it, went all the way to like you see some people are starting to recruit for class of 2026 and 2027. Like some of those guys are freshmen in high school. You don't know what they're going to do. They've just shown a small sample of what they can be, right? You can't just lose sight of some of these guys in this current recruiting cycle because it's not done yet until February. And it's kind of an opportunity for this staff to look for players that are being overlooked because other schools have moved on to the next cycle. I'm not saying that this guy's going to be a superstar by any means. We really don't know what he's going to be. But like you said, Brum, sometimes you need a guy that's going to be a project, that's going to be very coachable, that you see that kind of personality in him, or I guess that the coaches see that personality in him. And at the end of the day, for us as fans, if this dude is a contributor on the field, you're not going to go back in 3 or 4 years when he is on the field, if he gets there, and say, man, I don't know, or you're not going to say, I wish we didn't have him. He was a no star or only a 3-star coming out of high school. You're going to be like, man, I'm glad he's on the field. He's making plays for us. And if he becomes an Oklahoma legend, I know that's a stretch, but if that happens, like a Baker Mayfield on, walk on, you're going to just look back and think, man, that guy was awesome to have on the team. He's a legend. You're going to talk about him for the rest of your life as a guy you really liked watching on the field. So don't just be distracted by the stars or because we didn't get these highly recruited guys and David Hicks or Caden McDonald or Jordan Renaud. Just think about like what can possibly happen, right? And yeah, again, it's frustrating that we're losing out on so many guys, but as long as this is really the situation where I think it's fair to say you got to kind of trust the coaches and just kind of hope that they're looking for the right things and what they're doing here late in this cycle. And also, David Hicks isn't done. I think my biggest indication of his recruitment not being done is that players are still talking. The players in this recruiting class are still talking about wanting to get him to flip. If they weren't talking about it, then I would be pretty much done with it, just like a lot of people probably are. But you still hear Jackson Arnold. Occasionally you'll see, Derek LeBlanc or Samuel Masigo talk about they still want to try to get him to this class. Clearly there's still some mutual interest because we saw it with Colton Bosick. They started tweeting about him and that train kind of started steamrolling and he ended up committing to Oklahoma. Probably a poor example for some people, but that's kind of what happens. As long as that name is still in the commit's mouth, I think there's still a good chance Oklahoma has to flip them.
And, if Texas A&M continues to flounder and OU gets hot, like I said, play on the field sometimes influences decisions. And I'm not saying that David Hicks is going to decommit, but you're right. As long as they're still talking and they're still acting as if there's a chance, you just have to take it. And also, we're not coaches, we're not scouts, we're not whatever. We're just giving our opinions, what we see from afar. And obviously OU sees him, Marcus Strong, as being a guy that could potentially contribute, because if you could see this kid never contributing, you would never offer him a scholarship. You see something where David Hicks might come in as a day one starter, but Marcus Strong might come in and be a year two or year three starter. There's nothing wrong with that. You need guys like that. And also, he might be a great culture fit, and he might help build the culture. And at the end of the day, if that's what it is, and he's a year two, year three starter in 2025 winning the SEC, people are going to be happy. I mean, Danny Stutzman wasn't highly regarded. R. Mason Thomas was a 3-star, and now he's starting to contribute. People are liking him. I mean, stars don't mean everything. We've had 5-stars like Hazelwood, never really panned out. Trayshawn Bridges never really panned out. Seth McGowan never panned out. I mean, there's so many different variables that some of these high star guys don't pan out. And I don't know what the statistic is, but how many first round picks in the NFL are 5-stars coming out of high school? It's not very many. Another guy that OU offered is Ashton Sanders, 6'3", 295 pounds. So he's almost already 300 pounds. He's a 2023 composite 3-star from Los Angeles, California. OU offered him on Halloween, October 31st. He's been picking up some steam. He's got offers from like Wisconsin, Maryland, Cal. He's got like a total of 13 offers, Colorado, Arizona State. He's got a handful of offers. He's nearly 300 pounds. That's always good. You want a guy of that size, nearly Caden McDonald size. It seems like he's going to get a visit lined up quickly and potentially visiting for Bedlam, which obviously that means he's interested. And for both Strong and Sanders, I will say that OU is the most prestigious football school that they hold offers from, and that carries weight with these kids.
Yeah, and I do want to correct something because Ashton corrected us himself. He's actually 278 pounds right now.
Okay.
I think 247 right has him at 295.
Okay.
So they have never updated it. But yeah, so he's still a heavy guy. It's not like he's light by any means. And someone in the comments to the tweet that you put out asked if he would play at 300 or 295. His response to that, like every player should be, is I'll play at whatever weight I'm asked to play. And Todd Bates mentioned it when he first got hired with weight and like how he plans on managing that with his players. You got to give him windows. If this is a guy that ends up committing to Oklahoma, Todd Bates, I would assume he's probably going to be redshirted unless he can pack on significant amount of muscle and weight where he can still move at a very efficient and pace and is still strong to do his job on the field. If not, Todd Bates and Jerry Schmidt are gonna work together and find that window where his weight is gonna be in that perfect 5-pound range where it's manageable for him throughout the year, and him be able to be the athlete they need him to be on the field every Saturday. Yeah, again, it's very similar to Marcus, right? This late in the recruiting class is where you just gotta assume the coaches are doing their due diligence and the guys that they're offering. Because at this point, very many schools, especially a school to the level of Oklahoma, are not offering a lot of new kids. We're doing it to Oklahoma, and other schools are doing it to try to backfill in the spots where maybe they feel like they're falling a little short. And the fact that Oklahoma is trying so hard to try to get more defensive linemen shows that they understand that this defensive line group as a whole still needs a lot of developing, and they need a lot more bodies in those rooms. I think that's a good sign. Again, I understand the frustration because we're missing out on some of these highly recruited guys, but they're at least trying to do what they have to do as coaches and recruiters to put a good football team together. I think that's one thing we've missed over the last 5 years with the previous staff. When we saw the last staff miss out on a kid, you never really saw them try to backpedal and look for other kids to try to replace that miss. You just take it as an L and move on to the next class. I mean, after Jace McClellan and Kamar Wheaton decommitted, I don't really remember the last staff looking to try to backfill those spots with other running back running backs in that class. They kind of took them as an L and moved on to the next, which is their philosophy. But I think to build a good program, you kind of got to just take the L, self-assess, be like, yeah, we took the loss, and let's just go find someone else that's going to be a good asset to our team. If it's a locker room presence, maybe they just see him as a massive rotational guy. At the end of the day, the coaches see something that intrigues them enough to offer them. Because Brent Venables said it too. These offers aren't meaningless. They want them to mean something, and they're not going to devalue it themselves.
No, they're not going to just dole them out. Just say, "Hey, we offered X amount of scholarships to, or offers to 2023, just cause." And because if you offered everyone, it doesn't become special. And so, yeah. So I mean, overall, I think OU will probably land one of these kids if they really want one of them and put a full court press on. I think they can get one or both if they really want them. And I think it's going to come down to some of these offers that are going out late in the cycle are kids that, if they feel really wanted by a program like Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma can win out. And you're not competing against an Alabama or Ohio State, because they might already have their class filled out. And I don't think this philosophy of having a recruit, offer late will continue for very long. It's just part of the rebuilding process, and it is what it is. It's going to be okay. OU's going to be fine. OU's showing signs of improvement, and it's okay. OU could still flip David Hicks. I mean, they're still there. So you're telling me there's a chance? I mean, you never know. So a lot of recruiting talk there, talking about defensive line, and I'm sure some people have some thoughts on there. So curious to see what people have to say about our discussion of Caden McDonald and new offers and all that stuff. So do you have any thoughts before we move on to actual a game preview, talking about this upcoming game?
I'm going to switch it up. We're going to do a mid-video challenge.
All right. For the real people that watch this video.
For the real people that are watching it in its entirety. I'm just going to take what you said there. What do you think about the job that Todd Bates has done through this recruiting class, and even think back to the 22 class coming in late, trying to fill that in, ended up being the number 6 class in the country when it was all said and done. Do you like it? Do you feel like he's just not the right guy? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're wrong either way or you're right, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I will give my opinion. I like Todd Bates, and I think he's great. So that's all I'm going to say. I support him, and I think he's good for the program long term. So, okay, so we'll talk a little OU Baylor. So OU coming off of a 2-game win streak. Obviously, there's a bye week in between. OU's won twice since Red River. Baylor has won twice. They've beaten Kansas and Texas Tech. Kansas has started to slide a touch. But Baylor is starting to look halfway decent. Oklahoma's starting to look halfway decent. And it's kind of a collision path. And they're both 5-3. Both really need a win to continue this momentum. The winner of this game will become bowl eligible, which some people thought at one point OU might not be bowl eligible. Believe it or not, I think they will be. And I think they will be at the end of Saturday afternoon. I think they will be. Looking at this game initially, looking at Baylor, the biggest guy in my mind that people need to know, if they don't know already, is Richard Reese. Richard Reese is the freshman running back. He's had like 370 total yards and 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games against Kansas and Texas Tech. He's got nearly 800 rushing yards on the year, 12 touchdowns. He's tearing it up. And him and Eric Gray have similar stats, other than he has more carries and more touchdowns. And Eric Gray obviously has fewer carries and fewer touchdowns. But 152 carries, 791 yards, and 12 touchdowns on the year so far for the freshman is pretty strong. I think OU is going to have their hands full with him. What are some of your initial takeaways and thoughts on this preview? And maybe you thought the same thing with Reese, or what else are you seeing?
Yeah, the Reese was the first name that popped into my mind when thinking about Baylor, because of the year he's had as a freshman. Clearly, the offensive line, and we said it back again at the beginning of the year. These teams had very similar. If you looked at them somewhat objectively, you could see that they were in very similar positions. Baylor had just lost a ton of talent on their defensive side of the ball, lost their starting quarterback, albeit willingly because they told him that he wasn't going to be a starting quarterback anymore. Replacing significant amount of talent, very much similar to Oklahoma. The only difference was Aranda had been their head coach, so it was more of a refill rather than Brent Venables. He was trying to start a rebuild, I guess, in a way, if you want, for lack of better words. But now when we're matching up, very similar teams. Run game, both teams have a very good run game. Offensive line has struggled at times throughout the year. Shapen this week, I don't think I think he needs to be the reason that we lose. If Richard Reese can just go off on us, I think there's a very good chance Oklahoma is going to end up taking an L this weekend. But I don't think that he will have a huge game. He'll have a good game, but nothing crazy. Because it really seems like this defense is starting to understand what the coaches are asking of them and executing plays. Hopefully that continues into this week. Biggest key is going to be the defensive line to me. Can they finally put it together? Because if there's one glaring issue with this defense right now, is being able to just put any pressure on a quarterback. And I saw something earlier that was saying Oklahoma's done really well in tackles for loss, which is great. That means we've been able to get after the running back recently, but after the passer, it's been a real issue. Really haven't had very many sacks. Couple pressures. I think last week was like the first sack in a couple of weeks for the Oklahoma defense. So not great. They've got to put it together. I don't know if it's giving our Mason Thomas more time. I'm not sure if Downs and Grimes are just not what, if the beginning of the season was just because we were playing against lesser competition, and now that they're at more equal level with who they're playing against, they're just getting stopped because of the physicality. Who knows? But something's got to click there this week, because if that defensive line can't put pressure on Shapen, he's going to eat up the DBs. He's a very good passer. I think he's right now completing like 67% of his passes for 1,800 yards. He does have 5 picks, so it's not like he's not prone to making a mistake, but I haven't watched every single Baylor game. But if we can't put pressure on him, I can't assume that we're going to get him to make those mistakes. He's got to see someone in his face to do that, like probably most quarterbacks at this level. They're not just going to throw it away because there was no pressure.
I agree. I mean, this defensive line has to be able to contain him. I mean, he's not, a super mobile quarterback, but he can run when he has to. So I think containing him, he's not like going to be an Adrian Martinez or anything like that against Oklahoma. But playing disciplined football, can they make open field tackles? Can they make shape and beat you, like you're saying? Can you take Reese? You're not going to eliminate Reese or neutralize him. You're just going to try to limit him. And if you can limit him, are you able to contain the wide receivers and the tight end? And their leading receiver is Gavin Holmes, and he's got 470 yards on the year, but 210 of his yards came in one game against West Virginia. Not saying that he's not good, but I'm just saying that like 40%, of his receiving yards came from one game against West Virginia, who's not great. So can OU contain him? Yeah, I mean, he's not overly huge. They've got a tight end. I forget his name. He's like 6'5". He's a little bit of a bigger guy.
Ben Sims.
Who is it?
Ben Sims.
Yeah, Ben Sims. A few guys like that. So I think the biggest thing is that containing Shapen, containing the running back, and then the best player on defense is Al Walcott. The safety, he's got 48 total tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, an interception. He's going to be playing a lot of in the box. He's going to be playing against the run because Eric Gray is obviously a focal point of this offense for Oklahoma, and OU likes to run the football. And I think he's going to be coming down and trying to help, make Dylan Gabriel beat them, which I think Dylan Gabriel can. And what I'm looking for out of Oklahoma is not only the defensive line, but I'm looking for this secondary and linebacking core to really play disciplined football. They look better against Iowa State. Is it because OU is improved or that much better, or is Iowa State not that good of an offense? I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think it's a mixture of Iowa State's not great, but I think OU's improved. And I think you're going to see the continued improvement. I don't think they're going to be embarrassed by Baylor. Baylor isn't that imposing or that much more talented on the offensive side. Looking at OU's offense, I'm going to say that I think Marvin Mims is going to get involved and used early. I think they're going to make it a point to get him rolling. And I know some people were saying, this is arguably Marvin Mims' worst game as a Sooner, against Iowa State. And probably, yeah, I would say so. But you can't be perfect every game. I mean, Devontae Adams in the NFL this past Sunday had like one catch for 3 yards. I mean, it's just sometimes you just isn't your day, and you can be the best of best, but sometimes it's not perfect. So I think Marvin Mims he's due for a big game. I think he'll have 100+ yards against Baylor. And you're going to see OU try to get him rolling. I think Jalil Farouk is going to continue to establish him as the, Mims and him are 1A and 1B as far as options go in the receiving core. I give Mims the 1A category and Farouk 1B. And then you're going to see Eric Gray. I think he's due for 100+ yards again. That he's averaging, what was it, like 99 yards, 99.5 yards a game. He's going to run for 100. If Eric Gray can run for 100, Mims goes for 100+. I really like OU's chances, and I want to see this offensive line take the next step, and I think they will. I think OU wins this game. I think as long as you get Mims and Gray going and the offensive line protects Gabriel, I don't think OU. I think it'll be a close game, but I don't think OU will struggle a whole lot. I think OU wins by a touchdown.
Yeah. And someone that Oklahoma, other than Reese, that might be able to hurt us is a young wide receiver they have, Hal Presley, 6'3", 199, and it looks like he's gotten more involved throughout the season in this offense. With the size that he has, we know Oklahoma's history currently with the DBs that we currently have. They can definitely do well, especially if they're very physical at the point of the catch. More than likely, they're going to somehow get it over the Oklahoma DB. I would expect Woody to definitely compete with him. Seems like Woody maybe was dealing with some sort of minor injury earlier in the year. Now that after the bye week has been able to take that rest and get back to what we all expected him to be, which was our more shutdown corner role with this defense. Again, hopefully, it sounds like Billy Bowman is going to be on the field. I know he played a lot more than it was expected of him to play last week. So hopefully this week continues to trend in the right direction with that injury and gets him to 100%, getting him back to normal play time. Because he's going to be important. Again, if Chapin is able to have a good game, I think Hal Presley is going to be the guy that he's going to target with the size he has. I'm sure Aranda and Baylor's offensive coordinator know that Oklahoma's DBs are very poor against bigger receivers.
For sure. I mean, I think most people, realize that. And I will say that Baylor's defense is good. I do think that it's going to be a challenge for this offense, and it's going to be a good measuring stick game. Baylor is only giving up a total of 337 yards a game. And just to give a little perspective, OU's given up 438 a game, so 100 yards less for Baylor. But the one thing I will say is Baylor also has a backloaded schedule. They already have played Oklahoma State. They did lose to them. They did give up 43 to West Virginia. But they go OU, Kansas State, TCU, and Texas. Both TCU and K-State can score the ball. Obviously, we've seen Texas be able to score the ball depending on, it depends on the week for them. And OU can score if they want to as well. So I will say, looking at, Albany, BYU, Texas State, Iowa State, OSU, West Virginia, Kansas, and Texas Tech. Kansas has been kind of sliding. Texas Tech isn't that great. They haven't played the best of the offenses in the Big 12. And so I do think that their yards per game could be somewhat deceiving, but Dave Aranda is also a great coach. So I might be totally wrong and eat crow as they go through the remaining 4 games here. But I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think OU is going to be able to slow them down a decent amount. And I think OU wins. Do you have a score prediction, or do you have some more thoughts on previewing this game?
I do think Oklahoma wins. The line is currently 3.5. I'm not going to give my pick yet, or my pick on the spread yet, but the point total is 57.5. Last week, we went under, and we were going against a good defense. Baylor's offense is better than Iowa State's, but I wouldn't say by a ton. So I think that it'll be a very low scoring game. Oklahoma's defense is going to be able to make plays when they're on the field. And I think Baylor, with Aranda being their coach, will be able to make plays as well on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think we'll see the same thing that we saw out of Marvin Mims last week. But I really don't expect any receiver to have a huge game. And by huge, I mean over 100 yards, just because of how their defense is. They're pretty long, really physical. So I really think it's going to be more like a 28-25 game. I could see that, and them being able just to cover because of the hook.
Gotcha. I'm thinking I'm going to go under on the total as well. That's not going to be actually one of my bets, but I'm thinking 31-21 Oklahoma. I think OU might be able to be up 24-21 and maybe lead basically kind of a game-winning drive and ice the game and go up 31-21. I'm not sure. It might be. I was torn on going 31-24, but I'm going to go 31-21. I think OU wins by 10, covers the spread. I think being at home also helps tremendously here. So, do you have any other thoughts or anything regarding recruiting or anything like that?
Nope, okay. Not today. Hopefully it's a good weekend though.
Yeah, I hope so too. So if you made it this far, we really appreciate it. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and also for any of you guys that just wanted to enter in the tickets and skipped all the way through. Well, it's the middle of the video challenge, so you're gonna have to find it somewhere. I don't know what minute mark. It's somewhere in there, so just watch the whole video. Do the challenge that Jose put out there, and we'll be looking for that, and we will announce the winners Friday morning, and then hope to get an email confirmation Friday afternoon or something. So you made it this far. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, do the middle of the video challenge. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And we will catch you guys Friday morning.